Hello children, myself Mrs. Sabita Patnaik, teacher in economics, DM School, Regional Institute of Education, Bhubaneswar. Children, in this session today we will continue with the chapter Poverty as a Challenge, chapter 3, class 9th of economics. In the previous session children, in this chapter we talked about what is poverty, how poverty is measured, what is rural poverty, what is urban poverty, who are the vulnerable groups, and we also discussed about the interstate disparities in poverty. Now we will continue with the same chapter today and we will be discussing the poverty as a challenge from the global perspective. We will see today the global scenario of poverty and also we will discuss the causes of poverty and the anti-poverty programs. Okay children, we all know that poverty is a challenge in India, but poverty is also an issue at the global level. It is a global issue. Poverty is not seen only in India. It is seen also in the countries in Asia, many countries in Africa and also in Latin America. Inadequate housing, poor health, poor housing, inadequate education or poor education is not only the feature of India, but it is also a feature of the developing countries like Nigeria, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia and so on. Now let us have a look at a video to understand the poverty at the global level. Okay children, you can watch the video right now.
Global Citizen campaigns on extreme poverty. But what exactly does that mean? Extreme poverty refers to the extreme deprivation of human resources, including food, water, sanitation, health, and education. Right now, about 736 million people currently live below the international poverty line, which means living off of less than $1.90 a day. This severely limits their access to basic human needs. The majority of people who live below the poverty line exist in just two regions of the world, Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Overall, half of all the world's poor live in just 5 countries: India, Nigeria, the Congo, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh. Many live in small rural areas with limited resources or areas heavily affected by conflict. Progress has been made though. There are about 1 billion fewer people living in extreme poverty than in 1990. But in some countries it's actually on the rise, and by 2030, 167 million children could live in extreme poverty. But we don't have to let this happen. We can take action. Leaders around the world have agreed to 17 global goals to make the world a better place and end extreme poverty by 2030.
Children, we could see some of the facts regarding the global poverty from the visuals. Now let us summarize the aspects of global poverty. There is extreme economic poverty as defined by the World Bank in many countries in the world, particularly in Asia, Africa and Latin America. There are many people who are living on less than $1.90 per day. The proportion of people living in poverty has fallen from 36% in 1990 to 10% in 2015. It has declined from say 36% to 10%. How has this declined? It is because of the economic growth happening in many countries. The global poverty has declined and poverty has basically and substantially declined in China and Southeast Asian countries due to rapid economic growth and massive investments in human resource development. Children, if you remember, we had discussed about the human resource development in chapter 2. There we had understood that how investment in education, investment in training and healthcare would bring about economic growth and development. So countries like China and the Southeast Asian countries, they have invested in human resource development, and as a result of that, the poverty has substantially declined. Now, the number of poor in China has come down from 88.3% in 1981 to 14.7% in 2008. Okay, and then again to 0.7% in 2015. You can see how it has declined in China. China has done a remarkable job as far as reduction of poverty is concerned, from 88.3% in 1981 to 14.7% in 2008. That period was long, okay? But from 2008 to 2015, there is a drastic reduction of poverty from 14.7% to 0.7%. This all is attributed to the economic growth. Then the number of poor in the South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan has declined rapidly from 510.4 millions in 2005 to 274.5 million in 2013. That is 34% in 2005 to 16.2% in 2013. Now children, have a look at this table. This is the table 3.2 in your book. It is there, so you can also refer to your book. Here we show the head count ratio. Head count ratio, if you children remember, in the last class I had told you, it refers to the number of the people who are below the poverty line. We have taken some selected countries in this table, and you can see the percentage of the people who are living below $1.90 a day. This is as per the 2011 data. Nigeria, it is 53.5 in 2009. Bangladesh, it is 14.8 in 2016. India, 21.2 in 2011. Pakistan, 4 in 2015. China, 0.7 in 2015. Brazil, 4.8 in 2017. Indonesia, 5.7 in 2017. And Sri Lanka, 0.8 in 2016. Now you can see here, India is having the highest poverty. It is second to Nigeria. Okay. Now, let us have a look at this graph also. This is showing the people living on less than $1.90 a day. From this graph, okay, we can find out that how the poverty has got reduced. If you take the data from 2005 to 2015, you will find that the poverty in China has drastically reduced. And the maximum poverty that is visible is particularly in the Latin America and Sub-Sahara Africa. The maximum poverty is visible in the Sub-Sahara Africa. In Sub-Sahara African poverty, the poverty has declined from 51% in 2005 to 41% in 2015. Latin America, the poverty has declined from 10% to 4% in 2015. Now children, poverty is declining. It is substantially decreasing because the government of the respective countries are focusing on how to reduce the poverty and provide the minimum basic requirements to the people who are below poverty line. The new Sustainable Development Goals that has been adopted by the United Nations, it proposes that we all should be able to end the poverty of all types of poverty which is there in the global scenario. They can be removed or tackled by 2030. Now, let us have a look at this graph also. You can see the countries which are having more poverty and how they have been able to reduce it from 2005 to 2015. Here in this graph also the same aspect is visible, that China has been able to reduce the poverty to the maximum. And it is the Sub-Sahara Africa which is having the maximum number of people who are surviving on $1.90 or less than that. Okay, children, now we got an idea that what is the global scenario of poverty. Okay, and we realize that poverty is not only a feature in India, but it is also a feature in many other countries. Okay, and all the countries are trying to reduce the extent of poverty. Now let us come back to our Indian scenario and let us discuss what are the causes behind this poverty. Okay, now causes, we know that many of the things we had discussed in the previous chapter, from there we can link that one of the major cause of poverty is lack of literacy and high growth rate of population. Okay, we'll discuss how illiteracy and rate of population growth is responsible for causes of poverty, but let us first understand the historical reason which is behind the extent of poverty that we are facing today. Now, if we go to understand poverty, it is not a feature of recent past. During the long British rule in our economy, the poverty was at that time very much glaring. What was the reason? The British government never focused on any sort of industrial development in our economy. And whatever traditional handicraft industries we had, textile industries we had, they were ruined because of lack of supply of raw material. This you must have all studied in your history topic also, that how Indian economy was exploited by the British economy, how they were taking the raw materials from our country to feed the industries of their economy. As a result, what happened? All our traditional textile industries, handicraft industries, they all died because of lack of the resources. And from then, the poverty started happening and increasing in India. No development of industries had taken place during the British rule in our country. So the extent of poverty which was there in our country, that was high at the time of independence. It was around 45% during the 1950s, and it continued to be the same till 1980. Why it continued to be the same? Because of, say, the growth rate of the economy was not at par with the growth rate of population. Population was increasing, and at the same time, though the economy was growing, enough investments were made for establishing industries in the private sector and also in the public sector. Green revolution happened during the 60s. Okay, but in spite of that, the failure of the government in controlling the growth rate of population and increasing the economic growth rate, that perpetuated the cycle of poverty. The cycle of poverty is such that once one is poor, he or she continues to be poor. Why? Because once you are poor, you are not having any source of livelihood, no income. So there will be no education, there will be no healthcare provisions, and as a result, the cycle will continue. So even though we could increase our agricultural production through green revolution to a larger extent, and also we could establish large number of industries before 1990, yet we could not reduce the percentage of population to below 45%. But a drastic change happened. What was the drastic change? The new economic policy was adopted in the year 1991. In the new economic policy, we adopted the policies of globalization, privatization, and liberalization. These are the three happening changes that happened in the year 1990-91. We will be discussing about this new economic policy, that is liberalization, globalization and privatization, in your next class, in your higher class. But for the time being, you can just understand that there was a drastic change that happened in the economy. Investments flowed into our economy from the other countries through the multinational corporations, and as a result, what happened? The job opportunities increased, and the India's economic growth rate was one of the fastest after the 1990s. And as a result, we could create large job opportunities. But in spite of that, we were not able to increase the requirement of our opportunities for job in relation to the increasing population. Okay. Now, one important cause again in poverty is the huge income inequalities. Huge income inequalities, it happens because of the basic reason behind that is because of people not having any ownership to any assets like land. In our country, a majority section of the people who are living in the rural areas are not owning any land. And the government after independence did take measures to reform these land policies by taking away surplus land from the people who have more than enough and redistribute it in favor of the poor. But in spite of these reform measures, because of some ineffectiveness in the implementation of the policy of the government, it was not a very huge success. And as a result, this inequality still persists in our economy. And people are basically not able to come above the poverty line because of high level of indebtedness. Why high level of indebtedness? Because poor people, they depend on huge amount of credits and loans to meet their requirements. What sort of requirements? Suppose in rural areas, a farmer would require money to buy seeds, fertilizers or other things which are required for cropping. And if the farmer is not having enough savings, usually savings they don't have, the poor people, they do not have that habit of saving and say they are lacking in savings. So they depend on the loans which they take from the money lenders and they spend it in the purchase of seeds, fertilizers and all. And many a times people are also forced to incur loans due to many social obligations like to perform the marriage ceremonies and other rituals in the families, festivities like that, and they continue to remain in that debt. And that also accounts for a large section of the people remaining below the poverty line. Is it clear, children, what causes poverty? Then let us move to understand how this problem of poverty is being tackled by the government after independence. We cannot let the poverty to remain like that. So the government has been taking steps to eradicate poverty from our economy or from our country. Okay? Children, what anti-poverty measures the government has taken after independence? The current anti-poverty strategy of the government is based broadly on two planks. One is promotion of economic growth and the second is targeted anti-poverty programs. Government has been focusing after independence basically on two aspects: how to increase the economic growth and what are the targeted anti-poverty programs. Okay, we will be discussing what are the targeted anti-poverty programs and also we will be discussing how economic growth and reduction in poverty is related. What is economic growth, children? Economic growth is the increase in the income of the economy through production of goods and services. How will the income of the economy increase? It will increase by increasing the production of goods and services. So once we try to increase the production of goods and services, whether it is in agricultural sector or whether it is in industrial sector, it would require more and more people to work. So job opportunities will increase. As job opportunities will increase, then what will happen? People will have income. So once income flows in, they can invest it in education, invest it in healthcare, invest it in training, and thereby the perpetual cycle, a virtuous cycle will be created, which will be leading to reduction in poverty. And the government has been focusing on this economic growth. The growth was indeed slow from 1950 to 1990, which was around 3.6%, but it has increased to 6% by 1990, and then thereafter it continued to increase. In spite of that economic growth, to a larger extent, it has been realized that the poor has not been able to directly get the benefit from economic growth. And the growth that happened in the agricultural sector was also not at par with the number of people who are dependent on agriculture. That means what? The number of people who are depending on agriculture are more, and the growth that has happened in that sector is proportionately less. Yet the government is still focusing on how more and more investments in the areas of production can lead to more and more growth. Okay, children, now let us understand what are the various anti-poverty programs that the government has undertaken after independence. We will not be discussing all the programs. There are so many programs that the government has undertaken after independence to reduce the poverty, because it was one of the major challenge to reduce it. Okay, we will be focusing on some important anti-poverty programs. One important anti-poverty program that was implemented in the year 2005 is the NREGA, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Now this was the act which promised 100 days of wage employment to the people, which aimed at sustainable development to address the cause of drought in the village areas, deforestation and soil erosion. Because these are the three things, drought, deforestation and soil erosion, that is leading to what is called as unsustainable development in the rural areas. So that is why the aim was how to bring sustainability. And it proposed 1/3 of the job will be reserved for the women. Why women? Because it was realized that it is through income to the women the standard of living of the families can improve. And under this program, around 220 crores of the people were benefited through the employment. 4.78 crores of households were benefited through this NREGA. And the share of the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribe, women person days in the scheme are 23%, 17% and 15% respectively. In March 2018, the wage rate for unskilled manual labor has been also revised. State-wise, the range of wage rates for different states and union territories lies in between rupees 281 per day for workers in Haryana to rupees 168 per day for workers in Bihar and Jharkhand. Okay. Now another program which was launched or initiated in 1993 is the Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, PMRY. And this Yojana also focused on what? Creating self-employment opportunities for the educated unemployed youth in the rural areas and small towns. Those who are educated but they are unemployed. Children, you remember we talked about the educated unemployment in our previous chapter. Now, these people who are educated, who have completed their education but they are unable to find a job, the government helped them by providing them capital at low rate of interest both in the rural areas and also in the small towns so that they can go for self-employment. And next, the third program that we are going to discuss is the Rural Employment Generation Program, REGP. This was launched in the year 1995. Its objective was also the same, like create self-employment opportunities in the rural areas and also in the small towns. And it targeted at creating around 25 lakh new jobs under the 10th 5-year plan. The 10th 5-year plan which happened in between 2002 to 2007. During that plan, this program aimed at creating around 25 lakhs of new jobs. One more program that was launched in 1999 is the SGSY, that is the Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana. Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana, it basically focused on how to organize the people into what is called as self-help groups. The local people will be forming a group and they will first be advised to have their own savings, pull their own savings into the group, and once they have some savings with them, they can apply for a credit from the bank, and of course this credit will be at a subsidized rate. The government will be subsidizing it. So these organized self-help groups, through a mix of bank credit and government subsidy, they can have their own employment opportunities. Many self-help groups are working in India and these self-help groups has been a huge success. They take the credit from the bank and they have small production units in the rural areas and also in the urban areas which produces items which do not require huge capital. With small investments, they can produce and generate employment. What sort of items are they producing? Like say incense sticks, candles, pickles, papads, like this. These are the items, matchsticks and all they produce and they are able to generate income for themselves. Okay. Another program was launched in 2000. What was that? Pradhan Mantri Gramoday Yojana, PMGY. The central assistance to states for basic services like primary health, primary education, rural shelter, rural drinking water and rural electrification. These are the things on which this program focused. The center provided assistance to whom? To the state governments so that they can make provisions for primary health, primary education, housing, rural drinking water and rural electrification. And another program, Antodaya Anna Yojana, AAY, this was implemented in the year 1999. The focus of this program was to provide the food grains to the poor people. Now, after adopting all these programs, all these anti-poverty programs, we were able to reduce our poverty substantially to a greater extent. But still we are a long way to go. These programs were not very successful. There were many reasons why these programs were not very effective in their implementation. The implementation was not very effective and at the same time it was not also focusing on the targeted group. The benefits did not reach the actual poor of the economy. The benefits were derived by the people who are not the actual poor but they are basically the non-poor. Proper monitoring of the programs was also not done. As a result, these programs were not a huge success. And at present, the government is focusing more on its effective implementation and the planning and reaching the targeted groups. Okay, children. So we have discussed what is the global poverty scenario. We have discussed what are the causes behind poverty, and we had also discussed what are the measures that has been taken by the government to reduce poverty. And hopefully we are thinking that we would be able to eradicate poverty by 2030. Okay. Now let us have a reflection on what all we have discussed. Before that, we need to understand what are the challenges that is there for us. The challenges that we have to encounter in the coming decades is achieving the higher economic growth rate, increasing stress on universal free elementary education, because it is through education we would be able to generate employment. We need to reduce the population growth. Declining population growth is also a challenge to us, and we have to attain that. Increasing empowerment of women and weaker sections of the society. Increasing healthcare provisions. Achieving gender equality and dignity of poor. These are the challenges we have to take care of, or we have to face in the coming one decade, with the objective of eradicating poverty by 2030. We might be able to provide people with the minimum basic food requirement, but regarding achievement about the education, healthcare, gender equality, reducing or eradicating child labor, and providing dignity of life to the poor will be there, and we need to focus more on that. Now let us, children, reflect on all that we have studied through these questions. The first question is, the country which has the largest single concentration of the poor people in the world is China, Pakistan, India, or Nepal. Single concentration of the poor people in the world, it is of course India. India has the maximum population of poor in the world. Second question, Antodaya Anna Yojana was launched in which year? Is it 2003, 1999, 2000 or 2005? It is 1999. Third question, in which of the following countries did poverty actually rise from 1981 to 2001? Sub-Saharan Africa, India, China, Russia. The answer is Sub-Saharan Africa. Now the fourth question is, which scheme was started in 1993 to create self-employment opportunities for educated unemployed youth in rural areas and small towns? It is the Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, or the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, Rural Employment Generation Program, or Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana. Children, we had discussed that it is the Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana. The fifth question is, which one is the major cause of income inequality in India? Why there is income inequality in India? Because of unequal distribution of land, lack of fertile land, increase in population, gap between rich and poor. Yes, children, it is because of unequal distribution of land. And the last question in this session is, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA, was implemented in the year 2006, 2005, 2009 or 2010. It is in the year 2005. Okay, children. Now, before we wind up with this discussion, I would like to make you see one video to get an insight into how the empowerment of women is going to benefit the economy in reducing poverty to a larger extent. I hope you realized through this video that how women education is important for the growth of the economy and at the same time the growth of the social status of the people in the economy and also the educational status of the people of the economy. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you, children.